Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. On today's show, the Mets stay hot with a 4-2 week. We talk to starting pitching still leading the league. The bullpen finally hitting some bumps. Nimmo's big day down on the farm. Our scoreboard predictions. And of course, we close out the show answering your questions. So subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SMY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Spring is the season for new beginnings, and it's the best time to get behind the wheel of a sophisticated new Cadillac SUV. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. I'm your host, Connor Rogers, joined, as always, by my co-host, Joe DeMayo. And Joe, feels like a little bit more of the same. Besides one game that was a letdown, I mean, the Mets 4-2. On our Mets Pod week, for those obviously listening at home and keeping up with us. The 2 wins against Philly capped off the sweep. A very odd split with the Nationals, but the Mets take care of business on the final game in emphatic fashion. But before we get to all of that today, Joe, how are you?
I'm great, Connor. I mean, I'm glad we're not recording this on Monday morning. If we were recording this on Monday morning, the tone would be a lot different, because I think that game on Sunday was probably, not counting, potential elimination or something later in the season, I think that's going to be the worst loss that the Mets have this year.
You know how, like you feel like you're getting old? That was one of those games that I was watching the end of it on my way to SMY, actually, because we were doing the Jets draft special. So I'm watching on my phone on the train, and in the moment, like, I'm just irate, like stewing inside, but I'm out in public, so I'm keeping it together. And I've said this before. My wife, Kristen, is a huge Mets fan. She texted me. She's like, "Did you see what happened?" I'm like, "Yeah, I saw what happened." And within 20 minutes, I have to say, I had to remind myself how long the season is, and that not only do these things happen every single year, they will happen more on the other side for the Mets against the team rather than against the Mets. And in 20 minutes, I'm not going to lie and say I felt better, but the nature of a sport where there are this many games, Joe, things are going to go wrong at some point, no matter how good of a team you are, where especially when they put up a football level score the following day, it was just a reminder of how up and down the pendulum can swing with a long baseball season, and that this Mets team, despite a very, very disappointing loss with weird circumstances, is still a wagon, Joe.
Connor, when they lost that game, I just went, all right, well, stay off Twitter. That's number one. Do not
always
open Twitter.
Do not doom scroll.
Yeah. You are done Twitter for the day. And I was like, just find something else to put on. This is really annoying. So I was annoyed, but I get over these things relatively quickly. And speaking of the Mets being a wagon and the type of team that they are, like Carlos Mendoza and the way he leads his team, a loss like Sunday, we've seen that take days and days for teams to bounce back from.
Right.
The Mets bounced back next day, put up 19 runs, and some of them was off old friend Ahmed Rosario, so we won't exactly count them all. But putting up 19 runs the day after that tough of a loss is just a credit to the players and Mendoza, and just the way this team knows that they're good, and they were able to say, "Well, Sunday sucked. Let's just not do that again."
We've seen plenty of position players pitch in our time watching the sport, as everyone has, especially in this era where, I mean, the ability, like the eyeballs on the bullpen and taxing guys, I think coaches are more open to doing it than ever. Yeah. Rosario Joe is up there with the worst I've ever seen, where I kind of sat there and I was like, how did they come to this conclusion? And good for the Mets, by the way, for getting fat, because I'm a believer that if you're a professional athlete, and at the end of the day, whether it's arbitration, whether it's actual free agency, whatever it may be, whether it's that you're going to be a starter or not, numbers do matter, and you should never give away an at-bat. And the Mets certainly did not give away many at-bats in that game. And I think part of it also was, Joe, after how they had blown the game the day before, they were sitting there and going, we'll put up a 30 spot if we have to in this one. But it was definitely a sight to see whatever Rosario was doing out there on the mound. I almost felt bad.
Good for Mark Vientos. He made sure he took him deep and did what he had to do. And
first 3-run homer ever? Was that set on the? I just couldn't wrap my head around that.
I don't know if I'm just going to trust the broadcast knows what they're talking
Yeah.
about, but that's definitely a surprising stat to me. And Urania, credit to him, didn't exactly pitch so well, but he got it. But he got a save. He got a save.
He did get a save. I don't know. I didn't have the energy, quite frankly, to do the diving, the deep diving. I would love to know how many pitchers in the sport have given up that many runs and gotten a save.
I think there was a stat on Twitter. Okay. I think it was like 19 ever or something like that.
Yeah, it's got to be, because there's games
low number
that where it's like, hey, we're going to throw you till your arm falls off because we're winning by 2 touchdowns and we're not going to waste anybody in this game. But you're also, you don't have it today. So, yeah, it was definitely something to see. So, I mean, the story, even with a tough loss, and I guess a surprising split with the Nationals because the Mets just take care of business against, it feels like everybody they play. This team was 4-2 during the Mets pod week, and they easily could have been 5-1 when you look at how the National Series went. And the Nationals do have some young talent, to their credit. They're still far away in a lot of areas, but you see a guy like James Wood play and what he could do. And Dylan Cruz had a tough start to the year, but we know he's going to be a good player for them, of course. It's not like you just can walk all over, like whatever the Rockies are doing right now, by the way. I think the Rockies have 4 wins this year.
Yeah.
4.
Yeah, I think they're on pace for 20 something wins. I saw.
I mean, that's the Mets are almost passing their on pace total for the season.
Yeah. Insanity.
So things could always be much worse. Much of the same with the starters, Joe. Everybody has been pretty much who they've been all year, where you're kind of waiting for the shoe to drop for the most part. And that, for the most part, has not happened. I think this is the first week, though, Joe, or at least a build-up or an extension of the last week, where the bullpen, what they were doing was not sustainable. We have been very open to that. And we finally saw some cracks here that were bound to happen. And on top of that, AJ Minter, we don't know how long this loss is going to be. And it does sound like it's the lat. They're being pretty adamant that it's the lat. The problem you and I would discuss a lot on this podcast last summer or late summer was, man, the Mets just don't have a lights out lefty in the bullpen. They don't. They've been piecing it together with guys that have stepped up from where they were the first half of the year, but they don't have that lights out lefty. They went out and spent good money on Minter, who is technically that lights out lefty, and he's been really good for the Mets this year. This is one of those losses where it's not the end of the world, okay? It's not the end of the Mets season, but it's definitely one that, for just a reliever, it's a pretty big one in the short term.
It's definitely a big loss, and I figured it was going to be a lat, Connor. When they say tricep tightness or soreness, that's often just a feeling of a lat strain. Like when Frankie Montas hurt exactly. So I wasn't surprised it was a lat, and I don't know what grade it was. I didn't see that yet. But the range of outcome for a lat strain, I mean, Frankie Montas is still over a month away from his lat strain that he had in his first bullpen session at the beginning of spring training. So we could be looking at, anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months. I mean, I'm not entirely sure what to expect with Minter, but it's a big loss. As you mentioned, from the left-handed side, it's Danny Young again, which is essentially what it was last year. And, he's had his good moments this year. So Danny Young, has to step up for the Mets now. But yeah, Minter's going to be a tough loss that they have to deal with for potentially an extended period of time. And the bullpen showing some cracks. It's bound to happen. Bullpens go up and down. And frankly, the health of the bullpen has been relatively surprising that nothing else has happened, because they are getting overworked to a degree. The starters right now are as good as the ERA and all the stats that you saw if you're watching on YouTube. ERA below 2.3, but it's a lot of 5 innings. It's a lot of 5 1/3. So these relievers are having to get anywhere between 9 and 6 and 12 or more outs in a game, and you could only cycle these relievers so many times, and eventually other guys going to come into the fold and play a role. But yeah, they'll miss Minter, and the bullpen I think is going to be just fine. They're just now missing one of their more valuable pieces.
And I think an extension of that problem is Minter obviously brought here to be the bridge to Edwin Diaz and a matchup player because he's a lefty. Joe, just hasn't been the Edwin Diaz we're accustomed to this year. And although at times you can kind of point back to some of the moments have looked not on the catastrophic level of 2019, but the closest comp would be what Diaz went through, it felt like, for a lot of 2019. And it's just not comfortable. he still has his high-end strikeout stuff. His strikeouts over 9 is actually higher than last year's by almost a full strikeout. But the most notable thing is, Joe, he's just giving up free passes at an alarming rate. I mean, 5.3 walks over 9 innings. He is essentially, when he gets on the mound, it almost feels like it takes 2 batters to just get comfortable up there. I don't know what the solution to this is, Joe, because the one solution we've thought is that Diaz is a guy that likes to pitch a lot, and maybe that gets him in a rhythm. But we've seen the Mets be very careful with Edwin Diaz so far, almost to the detriment of where it's cost them a game or two at this point. So, Joe, is there something specific here, or is this just somebody off to a rocky start to the season? Not a disastrous start, but right. I mean, this is the Mets' $100 million closer, and this is going to be a talking point with this team.
For sure, and it should be, right?
Yes.
But it's really it's a couple blow-up outings, I think, that have inflated his ERA. He's 7 for 7 in save opportunities, so he hasn't actually physically blown a save.
Right.
To your point, it feels like he comes in the game and the first batter's getting on a walk. Like, it seems like he doesn't have his feeling when he first gets in the game, and he has one leg being longer than the other, and this weird kind of hip thing that he was dealing with. So it's a bit of a rocky April for Diaz, but what I have liked is the velocity is there. He's 98, he's 99.
The stuff is there.
Yeah, the stuff is fine. And it seems once he puts someone on base, he's like, oh, okay, now it's time to get settled, and then he'll strike out the next 3 guys. So it's not been all bad, but these putting guys on have largely come against teams that we don't expect to do much this year. And not saying anything, you have to play whoever you play on your schedule. That's just the way it works. But when you get into, the tough part of summer and you're going to be facing better baseball teams as the season goes on, you can't just be putting people on base, because better teams will make you pay, where lesser teams, you may be able to get away with it.
Here's the craziest stat to me with Diaz, Joe. So last year he threw almost 54 innings across 54 games. This year he's thrown 12 innings across 12 games. Last year, in that workload, he hit 3 batters and threw 3 wild pitches. This year, he's already hit 2 batters and thrown 4 wild pitches.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about literally 1/5 of the sample size of last year, but he has already surpassed the wild pitches and will soon pass the batters he hits. That is a total lack of, there's no feel for Diaz up there sometimes.
Yeah, it comes and goes. And goes, and part of that too, and I think to your point about maybe getting more work is beneficial for him. Ideally, it's save opportunities, but you could pitch him in non-save opportunities as well, and you just need guys like Ryan Stanek or Reed Garrett or someone else to come up on a day where Diaz may be unavailable. But he has a delivery that has a lot of moving parts in it. It's the up, the down. Like, it's not what you would really want to teach anybody to pitch.
Right.
You wouldn't take a young person and say, mimic what Edwin
replicate
Diaz
this
does.
Yeah,
you wouldn't want that. So it does lead to some inconsistencies where his arm sometimes is a little behind the ball, or the arm angle gets a little low and the ball will kind of tail off to the arm side. That's usually when you could tell, Connor, I think, when Diaz just doesn't have it right away, is when you see stuff going up and into righties, and anything arm side is where it seems like I think mechanics are out of whack. If things go down and away, that's more, over breaking a slider or something like that. So it's an interesting start to Diaz, where there's plenty of good, but there's things that you have to look at and say, this needs to get rounded into form as we move throughout the summer.
And somebody we hope is starting to round into form after just an outburst ties the Mets single game RBI record is Brandon Nimmo. The Mets win 19-5 the final game against the Nationals, really on the back of Nimmo, Joe. He's been a big talking point of this podcast. I mean, obviously, as Mets fans, we love Brandon Nimmo, and we've discussed that he just hasn't been the same guy almost since the second half of last year and throughout all of this year. And even when you go back to the last game in the series against the Phillies, he was in a 2 for 16 rut from that game to the second to last game against the Nationals. And the larger issue at hand, I think, that we've all realized is, like, in that stretch, he only drew 1 walk. So with Nimmo, when he's not hitting for average, he's a guy that typically works counts, gets on base, and that part of his game is oddly deteriorated. And then he has an outburst against the Nationals, Joe, where he goes 4 for 6. He hits the 2 home runs. He drives in 9 RBIs. Obviously, that's going to help the numbers. I think the hope here, though, Joe, is that just Nimmo's confidence. Nimmo is a streaky player. Like, he's typically been a streaky player, and he's a player that when he's on, he can literally pull you to wins single-handedly. Big moments, late in games, home run power now, which is, very interesting. This is somebody that it's not even May, and he's got 6 home runs, Joe. I think if you said that about Brandon Nimmo 7 years ago, you'd be like, what? When did that happen? But hopefully this is a sign of good things to come, Joe, and not just a flash in the pan, because as you see with yesterday, the difference with a hot-hitting Nimmo lengthens this lineup so much after the top 3 versus when he's not producing in those key spots, that if he can get going, it changes the entire Mets offense. We can't say it enough.
As crazy as it may sound, he hit the 2 home runs, the grand slam, drove in 9 runs. The most impressive at bat to me was the single that he put over the shortstop's head into left center. That's him. That's how you know he's seeing the ball well. And Nimmo right now, it's a really tough evaluation because we've talked about it over the last couple of weeks on the show. His approach has left a lot to be desired, right? Like much more aggressive in counts. And it turns out that was a message that the Mets actually wanted him to become a little more aggressive. And I would like to see that scaled back just a little bit. Right. But if you look under the hood, so this is the old balance of the eye test, because I watch the Mets every day. I watch Brandon Nimmo's at bats, and I don't particularly like them, other than yesterday where everything was, roses and everything was great. But then you balance it with some of the under the hood numbers. So he has an expected batting average of 266. So theoretically,
which would be fine,
which would be perfectly fine. He's in the 88th percentile in average exit velocity among all players. He's in the 97th percentile in hard hit percentage. His walk percentage is down significantly. I mean, we're talking more than half of what a normal Brandon Nimmo season would be. And his strikeout percentage is down like 6% from last year. So he's simply putting the ball in play more than he has historically. And his 212, I know you love BABIP, Connor. His batting average on balls in play. So if you combine...
Big BABIP guy.
Yeah, if you combine his BABIP with the hard hit rate, it's implying that he's largely putting the ball in play, hitting it hard, just hitting it at people. So
that's how I felt Soto was for the first couple of weeks of the season, by the way, as well.
Yeah, and Soto, for me, we don't have to go too deep on Soto. It seems like it's maybe turning a bit of a corner. I wish he was hitting the ball in the air more, but that's a different conversation. Largely on the Nimmo front, it feels like under the hood, there's a lot of bad luck going on for him. But when you watch him play, I need to see that approach be better. So maybe a better approach in conjunction with this under the hood stats that I just spit out at you. I think that's where you get the Brandon Nimmo that we want to see. And to your point, streakiness has always and probably will always be a part of his game.
Without a doubt. It just, once again, it changes the lineup. And another factor of that is Luisangel Acuña and Jeff McNeil, Joe, which now the Mets need to kind of figure out how to get both of them enough playing time, quite frankly. I think Acuña has made it the most interesting because there's no one that could sit here and tell you with a straight face he is not taking advantage of the opportunities he's getting.
Right.
I mean, right now, Luisangel Acuña, and he's only had 72 plate appearances, but he's getting on base almost 35% of the time. Like that is, for a guy that's game is built on athleticism and stealing bases and running the bases well and playing good defense. That's what you want. I don't need him to hit home runs. I need him to walk, be a slap hitter, which he's done at times. So I think he's one of the most intriguing storylines of this team right now, because at what point is the 23-year-old that we were all excited about as a prospect and hit some bumps in the road in the minors, just a capable borderline everyday infielder at his age? Like, I'd like to find out. I would, but the flip side is, Joe, and it's really early, but Jeff McNeil's back. And I don't know what you think of this, Joe, but the 12 at-bats, 13 at-bats we've watched of Jeff McNeil, it looks like, and he did launch a home run once, it looks like the approach is a little bit similar to when Jeff McNeil is at his best. So I'm fascinated by how the Mets play this. It's a good problem to have because guys get hurt, guys go in ruts and slumps. And fortunately, McNeil has defensive versatility. I don't know if that includes center field over the long haul. I guess we'll find out. But it's good news, Joe, that both of these guys might be able to simply get on base for this team, for a team that has a lot of guys that like to try to hit home runs.
His versatility came in play in Monday's game. He played 3 positions in the football matchup with the Nationals. Started in center, played some right, and then played some second base as well. He hasn't done anything wrong in center field yet, so
yeah,
I might just
he hasn't been exposed yet.
I might just keep trotting him out there, at least for a little bit, for the interim, as much as I can, because I don't want to be taking Luisangel Acuña out of the lineup. I think there's no reason why you need to force Tyrone Taylor into playing regularly. I think he should be looked at as what he is, the 4th outfielder. I'm hopeful that the Mets will give Acuña a shot in center. I know he's taking reps and he's working towards being game ready at the position, because I think athletically he profiles obviously better than Jeff McNeil does in center field. But for now, let's just get both these guys in the lineup. You know, the banner at the bottom said, how will you handle the split? I don't really want there to be much of a split right now. I want both of them in the lineup, get Jeff and his torpedo bat in there and his approach, getting back to maybe the Jeff McNeil that we knew. And it's not just, I think often people go, well, he's not the batting champion, Jeff McNeil, who hit 335. He doesn't need to be the batting champion, Jeff McNeil. I want the Jeff McNeil that for the second half before he got hit by that curveball in 2024, put up a near 900 OPS. That's the Jeff McNeil I actually want. And you're batting him down in the order. So I want to see him and Acuña in the lineup as much as possible.
Yeah, with Jeff McNeil, I mean, you're looking for the guy to, not be the batting champion, but can you, I don't know, hover around 300? That'd be amazing.
Yeah. Give me 280 lineup. and be an extra base hit threat. Maybe not so much the home run like he hit, obviously, in Monday's game, but if he could be a doubles hitter that gets on base at a pretty good clip, hits 280, like I don't think that's asking for way too much, personally. And that is, speaking to deepening the lineup, you talked about Nimmo, having Acuña bat 9th, doing what he does, get on base for the Lindors, the Sotos, the Alonsos, with the ability to steal bases. And I think we're about to get into someone else that might help deepen the lineup too, Connor.
Yeah, more reinforcements on the way. Francisco Alvarez is back, and Alvarez, a good sign in his early return, Joe. Just the fact to hit an opposite field home run, because the thing with the hamate bone that we've discussed is you worry about the power being, ready to go when they return from that. That might take a little while. And Alvarez, once again, these are small sample sizes, but I hope these are the combos that we're having a week from now. Again, the approach looks good, Joe. I love his demeanor behind the plate, like as actually catching. Alvarez is very intense. It's great when he comes out to the mound and has something to say to Diaz, and he's a guy that gets through to him. He does. So
whatever works. Jeremy Hefner never goes to talk to Edwin Diaz. Alvarez got that himself.
Yeah, which is, if you're Jeremy Hefner, that's an incredible feeling to have. Yeah. And it's nothing. This isn't any knock on Torrens, who does a hell of a job on his own, but as we were saying, Joe, this just might be beneficial for everybody if this is a more of a, when things are really humming, a 60-40 split, like Alvarez is playing 60% of the time, because that might keep Alvarez healthy and fresh and let him step back and not, it feels like with Alvarez at the plate as a young player, when he is playing all the time, he starts to sink a little bit where he can't get out of what his bad habits are. And that maybe breaking it up and having a capable other catcher in Luis Torrens, who is exactly that right now, offensively and defensively, will allow Alvarez to slow down a little bit rather than I'm in the lineup every day. I'm the man. I got to hit a home run. So it was just 1 week of the reinforcements, Joe, but man, it kind of was a little, like a glimmer or a reminder of how important these guys can be on that bottom third or bottom half of this lineup for this team.
When you're talking about the 6 hitters and the 7 hitters and the 8 hitters, that sets you up where these pitchers just have no easy day at the ballpark. And when it comes to, You talked about 60-40, like, yeah, something like that, 60-40, 65-35, something like that. I do want Alvarez in the lineup more than I want Torrens in the lineup because I think Alvarez has a higher offensive ceiling, though Torrens at every instance possible this year has seemingly come up when the Mets really need him to. And the good problem that they have is that we're having this kind of conversation and this kind of debate while there are other teams in baseball that don't even have like a capable starting catcher.
Right.
The Mets are worried about how to divvy up playing time between two good options. And Alvarez, I liked on the home run when he rounded third. He kissed where his hamate bone fractured on his hand. Just give it a little bit of love there on his way around third. And he just provides so much potential. And we worry about who's going to be the cleanup hitter, who's going to be the fifth hitter, the prime guys behind, the big three at the top of the order. There's no reason why Francisco Alvarez can't get his way into that conversation.
Without a doubt. It's just he's an energy guy for this team. We've talked about this, the balance of a roster. Winker kind of plays with a little bit of snarl and that sandpaper mindset. I think Alvarez fits that bill as well. And I think you can't have a team full of those guys because it would just be an absolute powder keg. But you need a team with a couple of those guys, or else you lose that juice a little bit. And Alvarez absolutely has that. All right, as we plan to do as much as we can, our new segment, although this is the second time we've done this segment, the Tales from the Pitching Lab, Joe, and the microscope is on the Tylor Megill. The spotlight is on Tylor Megill's adjustments this week, Joe. I'm just looking at the raw numbers right now for Megill. He's still that guy that's pitching, about 5 innings per start. But the strikeout rate is really, really climbed for him now. You look at 2 years ago when he made 25 starts, he was striking out 7.5 batters over 9. Last year, he got that up to 10.5. This year, it's up to 11.3, Joe. And the walk rate has gone down compared to the last 2 years. What is Megill doing differently that's working for him to that shiny, sparkling 1.74 ERA?
He's attacking hitters, Connor. He's getting ahead early. His first strike percentage is up about 4% from what it was last year. So it's important to throw first pitch strikes. And he's been much more successful in doing that. And he's also trimming his pitch mix. I went and I looked at StatCast. Last year, Tylor Megill tried throwing 8 different pitches. Just 8 different
It's Chris Bassett level stuff.
Yeah. And all due respect, he doesn't have that type of arsenal. It seems like
most don't for a reason.
Yeah, right. He was overthinking it, I think, and trying to do too much. He's trimmed that back to like a core 5, which I think makes sense. As you mentioned, his walk percentage is down, which is important. His strikeout rate is up. Importantly, he's missing barrels, which was a big struggle last year. He was below the 30th percentile in barrel rate, and now he's up over the 70th percentile. So he's not only... It's that balance that I bring up every so often on this show of control and command. He's throwing more strikes, and now his strikes are better. There was times last year where he would get behind, and in order to try to not walk a hitter, he's like, well, I just got to groove one and hope they don't hit it. And then they know it's coming, and they barrel it up. So a lot of good signs from Megill, who has always had good stuff. And as you mentioned, it usually seems like after 5 innings, it starts to tail off. Though in his last outing, he tried to get through 7. Like, he was fantastic against Washington. And then, Jose Butto gave up the home run, and it kind of went from there. But all in all, Megill is a guy that is clearly growing as a pitcher. I don't know. I don't see much as far as pitch usage really changing with his main core pitches. I don't see much anything different from them from a pitch value standpoint. I think he's just been more effective, and maybe that's just purely growing as an arm.
Yeah, I think you always forget too that Megill is still a young pitcher in terms of experience, right? Like, he came up as a 25-year-old. He hasn't been just handed things at times. He's kind of fallen into roles and then earned them in that spot where we're seeing this era, Joe, of, Griffin Canning's the perfect example right now. And we've talked a lot of Griffin Canning on this show. Guys are really evolving into their late 20s or even at age 30 and 31 because what they're able to try or rebuild in an offseason or change their, like you said, the pitch mix is a massive, massive thing for him. So it's intriguing to see what Tylor Megill could do. It's kind of funny, like before the season when injuries pile up, we're like, All right, Tylor Megill finds his way into the rotation again, and it's not that you're rolling your eyes, but you kind of look at it like, okay, he's going to hover around over a 4 somewhere ERA, and he might not strike a lot of people out. And you brought up he can kind of nibble, and this year it's all there for Megill through 6 starts. Where if he even pitches realistically to an ERA in the 3s this year across a full season, that is dynamite stuff for the Mets out of a number 4 or number 5 starter. So. Tales of the Pitching Lab, something that we are going to be doing all year, which is this is the perfect organization to do it because, man, the Mets just have a lot of stories like that right now. All right, let's go down on the farm like we always do. Let's talk a little Marco Vargas here, Joe, with his promotion to Brooklyn after a really, really hot start this season in St. Lucie, where through just 13 games, OPS over 1,000, 409 batting average, getting on base more than half the time. This was somebody that the Mets didn't really want Vargas wasting any more time down in low A ball.
Vargas came in as my number 17 prospect in the system heading into the season. Sorry. And if you remember back to the trade deadline of trading Max Scherzer and trading Justin Verlander, Marco Vargas was the headlining piece of the trade that sent David Robertson like in the middle of a game to the Marlins. And he made his way into the top 10 of the system at one time. And last year, he only played in 37 games. He had a wrist injury that he kind of battled on and off throughout the year. So he sort of fell off radars, kind of that out of sight, out of mind thing. And he's back to being what Marco Vargas is. I mean, this is plus bat the ball skills and plate discipline, as you mentioned. And you could see if you're watching on YouTube, hitting over 400, on base percentage over 500, more walks than strikeouts. He has 10 walks to 7 strikeouts. As he progresses through the system, you're going to want to see him impact the baseball a little bit more than he has historically. So he needs to still get, I think, a little more physically strong. But when you look at Brooklyn getting Vargas, and they're also getting AJ Ewing, who is off to a hot start for St. Lucie, I think that lineup is the most exciting one in any of the Mets affiliates. You combine guys like Vargas and Ewing with Carson Bench and Jesus Baez and Boston Barrow and Eli Serrano and Chris Suero. Yeah, it's a really loaded team. So I know we're going to talk about heading out to Coney Island. So if you have the opportunity and you're close enough, you should definitely go check out the Brooklyn Cyclones because I think it's a very special lineup when it comes to prospect capital.
And that's really exciting because this is a team that, the last time I went to a Cyclones game, and it was quite a few years ago, and I want to get out there because it's a blast. Honestly, it's such a good environment, not just as, a minor league park, but for any baseball park. There wasn't really a lot of talent that you looked at and said that guy has a shot to be with the big leagues for the Mets. And now you look at it, Joe, it feels like they're 7 or 8 deep with guys that can make the big leagues. I mean, you brought up just the lineup, but the team as a whole. And Marco Vargas, we'll be tracking him closely because I remember we were excited when the Mets got him in that trade as he was the headliner of that deal. And, he kind of fell off the map, like you said, for injury reasons. And this kind of start for him is everything you could ask for. And the Mets wasting no time getting him up to Brooklyn. Head to Coney Island on Sunday, May 4th, and enjoy the rooftop brunch with the Brooklyn Cyclones. You get bottomless mimosas and Bloody Marys, plus a buffet of brunch favorites, all while enjoying the game from the Brooklyn rooftop with the best view in baseball. For more info or to purchase tickets, just visit brooklyncyclones.com/brunch. You're listening to the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch on SNY's YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Joe, my favorite time of the week, the Scoreboard, where we review our predictions from last week and make some new ones. Yes or no, will Starling Marte hit a home run? And boy, did it feel good for myself to finally cash in a point on this one, Joe. He didn't hit a home run. We both take home a point. Over-under push was at 2 for Pete Alonso home runs. Joe, you pushed. I pushed. Pete Alonso didn't hit a home run during the Mets Pod week, so that's no points awarded here. Over-under push, Francisco Lindor home runs was at 2. Joe, you pushed. I went under. Lindor didn't hit a home run either. I get a point for that one. Over-under push at 3, starters going 6 innings. We both went under, and we both got a point. Only 2 starters went 6 innings, at least 6 innings. Over-under push was at 6 for Juan Soto hits. We both felt good about Soto. We both went over. He did exactly that with 7. We both got a point. Over-under push was at 4 for Mets wins. We both pushed. The Mets won 4 games. They really should have won 5, but the Mets win 4 games. We both got a point. Pretty strong week for both of us, Joe. Out of the 6 categories, you go 4 for 6. I go 5 for 6. Sorry to tell you, partner, I now lead the season series by just 1 point. It's 18-17. I'm keeping my promise of keeping this thing interesting through the early portion of the season. So let's waste no time and get into a new week that has 7 games. 7 games this week, not 6. 3 against the Diamondbacks, 3 against the Cardinals, and 1 more against the Diamondbacks on the back end. I win the week. I'll kick us off. Over-under pushes at 1 for Francisco Alvarez home runs. Joe, I will go under. I think the play time will be split pretty close to even at this point. So if you're just playing the numbers, say Alvarez gets 4 games, 1 home run across 4. Of course, he could do it, but I'll still take the under in this spot. What do you like?
Last week, it was a lot of the same. We were really different on, I think, 1 pick, essentially. So that needs to change.
For good reason. We had a good rate.
We knew what we were doing. And but for the case of Alvarez and the home runs, I will join you on the under. I still think when you think about the hamate bone and the power sometimes being slow to come back, even though he did hit one in the Washington series, I'll say he just doesn't this week.
Yeah, it's an odds thing. We'd love to see Alvarez hit a home run, but I can't sit here off the top of my head and guess what his anytime home run will be for assuming the 4 games he plays. I would think, Joe, it's plus 650, maybe even higher. So if you were playing that across 4 games, it's more likely to not happen than to happen. So that's kind of basic math there on that one. Over under push is at 1 for Luisangel Acuña stolen bases. What do you like, Joe?
I'm gonna go over. I'm talking myself into the Mets just need to play Luisangel Acuña and Jeff McNeil essentially every day. And if McNeil is going to continue to get on base, as we showed earlier at like a 350 clip, he's going to steal more than 1 base across a 7-game stretch. So I'll go over for Acuña stolen bases.
He's already got 6 steals this year, and that's with less playing time than we're expecting him to get over this stretch. I'll push. I think he definitely could steal at least a bag here. He's getting on base. He's obviously going to use his athleticism. Joe's going with the over. I think this one will be really close. Could easily go over, could easily push. I'll take the push, be different here. Over under push is at 3 for starters going 6 innings. Now, this is 7 games, this one. The Mets starters typically don't do a lot of this. They had 6 games last week and went 2. That's why we both went under and hit. I'm going to push here, Joe, and say they can hit the 3 out of 7 games, but I think it'll be sweatier than you'd expect. Like if this was July, you would expect your starters to go at least 6 innings in 3 of 7 games. At this point in the season, it's still risky, but I'll take the push.
I'm going to push as well, and not just early season. The Diamondbacks offense is on fire.
Great team. Yeah.
And I can tell you, I recognized it when I picked up Eugenio Suarez on waivers the morning of his 4 home run game, which was really sweet for my fantasy lineup.
Oh,
wow. But Arizona is a potent offense, and they play them quite a bit. So I will push. I think they'll be able to get 3 of them, but I'm not going to go over.
This will be a pretty good test for the Mets. Not a test because it's so early in the season, but if let's be real. Like the Mets have not played a ton of great teams yet, and they've taken care of their business for the most part, and they did absolutely clobber Philly. Right. But, Lindor's children at this point, but his other children at this point.
Yeah, his other.
But
yeah.
The Diamondbacks they're going to pose a really difficult threat this week, and don't worry, Mets wins is on here. All right, Brandon Nimmo hits Joe is over under push at 7. Are you buying in that Nimmo is turning the corner after his big day?
I'm not going to buy in.
7's a lot.
I think this number is a little high, though I understand tempting me. I know what our producer was thinking because, shout out to Jolly Olive, friend of the show. Me and him just pretty much spearheaded what would happen for Brandon Nimmo during Monday's game. But I will go under. I think 7's too big of a number. But boy, if this is the start of a Brandon Nimmo hot streak, I will gladly let you have the point if you want to take the push or over.
No, I'm going to go under. I'd love to see it. We just haven't seen. I mean, Nimmo got his batting average over 200 from this historic game. Yeah. So 7's a big number. I would love nothing more than for Nimmo to push or go over. I think it's going to be an under. So I'll join you on that. Jeff McNeil hits is at 8. That's across 7 games. Not wild for Jeff McNeil. It's really not. Now you have to wonder how much do they push him through this 7-game stretch. I'm going to play the under here as well, Joe. 8's a big number. It comes down to playing time. If I see this week that McNeil is back to being the 300 hitter we love seeing him be, then this is a fair number. I just think it's a little early right now for a number this high. I'll go under.
I'm going to go under as well, which, by the way, way to go, Joe. Just say we have to be different. We just keep taking some of the same things. But I'm going under because we have a couple at least, and there might be more still to come. But I'll say under 8, and my reason is coming off of the injury in the oblique. Will they give him, a couple of games off? And if he gets 2 days off, you're talking about 8 hits in 5 games. That's a bit to ask, I would say. So I'll go under.
Well, to show how high the number is, the over-under push is also 8 for Juan Soto hits, Joe. So and Soto plays every day and hits really high in the order. So it's what do you like here? I mean, I have a feeling we're probably going to see eye to eye on this one too.
I'm gonna push on this one.
Okay.
I'm feeling better about Juan Soto's at bats. He's had multi hits over the last few games. He's reached in 6 of his last 9 plate appearances. So, not saying we're getting the Juan Soto that we have hoped and dreamed yet, because I'm still waiting for that home run power to really come out. But that double down the left field line looks so easy. He's still hitting the ball hard. It's just more on the ground than I'd like. But I think he could pull off 8 hits over the 7 games because, as you said, he's going to play every day.
Yeah, I'm going to take the over on this one. The Diamondbacks, they are in the bottom 10 in team ERA right now. And they have, obviously, talent in their rotation, but I mean, they've given up a lot of home runs so far this year. I think they're actually amongst the leaders in that category as well. They're up there. They're not in the leaders, but ERA is where they're worse. Nimmo should have good, Soto should have good matchups. He's going to play every day. I'll go over. So we have another different category here. I think Soto already has started to turn the corner. I think it's really, really going to pick up steam this week after a solid week for him. Joe, Mets wins is once again set at 4. This is across 7 games. We both pushed at this number last week, and that's exactly what happened, with the caveat that there was a meltdown game. So it could have really swung against our pick. I'm going to push because this is a tough schedule with the Diamondbacks being 4 of the 7 games, where you would think there actually might be some value in the over with how well the Mets are playing right now and what they theoretically could do in those 3 against the Cardinals. But I have a lot of respect for that Diamondbacks offense that we've discussed on this show already. I'll go with 4 out of 7 for the Mets. What do you like?
Yeah, I'm going to push as well. I was tempted for the over, but when I really evaluate getting the Diamondback sandwich around the Cardinals, it almost forces the Mets to have to sweep St. Louis again, right?
Right.
I think to get to that 5 number, and I'm not in the business of predicting sweeps ever. So I will say 4 because I think the Mets are plenty good enough to beat these teams, but I'm just not willing to say they'll go 5-2 over the stretch.
By the way, while looking up the amount of home runs the Diamondbacks have given up as a team pitching, because I noticed how high their team ERA is right now. That's bottom 10 in the league, but they are only 17th in home runs given up. But they've given up a lot. They're one of the teams giving up over 30 home runs. The Mets lead the league, but it's not that the Mets lead the league in fewest home runs surrendered. It's that they've given up 14, and the next team, the Texas Rangers, have given up 21.
Wow.
They're in a totally different stratosphere than everyone else right now.
So I think of the starters, there was one given up the other day, and Gary Cohen said the stat on air where Nimmo almost robbed it, just got into the flower bed just above the wall. And he was like, this is the first home run allowed by a starting pitcher since it was like April 11th, I think was the date.
They had a long stretch of not giving one up.
The starters are keeping the ball on the ground, and if not on the ground, in the ballpark.
All right, let's close things out with the mailbag. This is from Danger Zone 012 on YouTube. Are the Mets ever going to sign a GM? I have full trust in David Stearns and his vision, but I wonder if he would be even more valuable as purely a president of baseball operations, and he has a GM working under him. Any thoughts? Joe, before I toss to your thoughts, I almost wonder if Stearns is just evaluating the entire organization and would rather potentially promote somebody as like a chess piece in his back pocket to retain them from leaving.
I think that's probably an astute observation from your end, I would say. I don't think he's been very open that he doesn't need it. He doesn't have to have it. Essentially, in the president of baseball operations GM setup, the GM plays the role of an assistant GM, and the president of baseball operations plays the role of a GM. It's
Right.
just bigger titles to entice better candidates into your organization. So that's not to say David Stearns doesn't have friends elsewhere, because he's hired tons of people that he has not worked with prior for this organization. But you look at a guy like Eduardo Brizuela internally. He's with Stearns in Milwaukee. He's looked at as a future GM type of candidate. So maybe that's hey, we'll give you a promotion. You're the GM. The GM really just needs to handle day to day. And David Stearns, I think right now, has already delegated a bunch of those day-to-day responsibilities to Brizuela and other people in the front office, that if they hire one, great, but he doesn't feel like they need it. And I guess neither do I if he doesn't.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the Mets right now, because of how good of a run they're on from a roster building standpoint, they don't need to go outside the organization to add more people right now. What they're doing is working right now. So when you look at the baseball operations team, that was my point, Joe, of just the fact that if there's somebody that you like a lot and starts to get looks from another team to be the GM of that team, you could sit there and be like, well, if you want to stay, we'll pay you more because Steve Cohen owns this team, so he's going to pay more, and we'll give you the same title. Now, if you want to go run your own operation and have full authority, that's a different story, because that's an opportunity that's not a finance, and you're going to get paid well anyway, but that's something that people just dream of doing. But I just don't think there's any point until you have to. This is a nice wild card to have where you can potentially keep somebody that typically you wouldn't be able to retain, and they've added a lot of talent to this front office.
Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, Connor. It's a really well-oiled machine, I think, right now with the Mets, and you'd hate to disrupt that with, bringing in, maybe a name value GM from outside the organization. The thing that I'll say here is I trust David Stearns with everything, essentially. So
basically my life at this point.
Pretty much literally every single day I'm watching the team that he built. So I think it's literally my life and well-being that I trust David Stearns with. So I trust him to decide who his lieutenant is and what that lieutenant's title is.
Brian Carr, 1977 on YouTube. Mailbag from the pitching lab. Besides the obvious, which pitcher from Mets history that underperformed would have been helped by the pitching lab? I think Pelfrey would be my call. Your thoughts? Number one, Brian, this is a 10 out of 10 question. Yeah. Because I don't know how to answer. Joe will have a better answer than me, but because it has my brain. I don't read the questions always before we do the mailbag, because I like the surprise factor for this segment specifically. This has me spinning now, Joe. Who would have... the injuries broke him down and a lot of things fell apart, but if Syndergaard, when he was at his physical peak, had that kind of resource, I wonder what he could have truly done, because it always felt like Syndergaard had the traits to be one of the game's top pitchers, and physically he fell apart. But is there any real throwbacks? The Pelfrey suggestion is very interesting, Joe.
Pelfrey's a great one. Syndergaard actually kind of was going to be the name that I was going to go with, because it's just so much stuff, but he just never was able to harness consistency for a long period of time. Yeah. And, even on that same staff, like, he was perfectly fine, but I wonder what Steven Matz could have been at that point in time if the Mets were able to take him and drop him in that situation and really refine his stuff.
Well, you know what they think, how badly they wanted him back.
Yeah, that's true.
In free agency. So that tells you what they thought of what they could do with him.
And Steve Cohen's famous tweet that he didn't particularly appreciate how the agent handled that one. But boy, this is a great question, because the Mets they've rallied some interesting pitchers kind of throughout their time here. But I really go back to that. I think about that 2015 team that should have won the World Series and didn't, unfortunately.
Right.
And the pitching had such high-end potential and at times really flashed it. I wonder what could have been if you could have gotten those guys. And then even like the step below those guys, like the Dylan G's, who maybe didn't have like the best stuff in the world, but maybe, what Dylan G would have been? Dylan G would have been Griffin Canning.
I was just thinking that. I was like, why can't he be Griffin Canning?
That's exactly what Dylan G would have been. He would have been the Griffin Canning of this year. But I'll tell you, that's one of my favorite questions I think we've gotten on this show in quite some time. And It shows how far the Mets have come organizationally, that we're like, man, things are so great now. What could we have done if we just did this earlier?
Truly. By the way, Steven Matz this year kind of used in a weird role. He's only started one game, but he's appeared in 1.8 ERA right now. So Steven Matz maybe a resurgent year after, a tough shortened year last year. And then, with Matz, it's been health for the most part a lot, but you can see why the Mets wanted him back. And yeah, he's definitely an interesting one on that. Pelfrey, because he was a top 10 pick and he had 2 really good seasons, but then a lot of ups and downs, didn't strike out a lot of people. Right. That would have been a really interesting one as well. That's a great question from Brian. I'd be curious in the replies for people to tell us who their pick would be, because there's probably guys that go way further back than when Joe and I started watching. You truly started watching like mid and late 90s, right, Joe?
For sure. Yeah. Mid late 90s. And that's really my go-to zone. And if you think back, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, would Steve Traxel have benefited from the pitching lab?
Yeah, that's maybe a name that came to mind for me right away. Like, I don't know. And we didn't have data back then.
Right. So we had no
publicly idea. I'm sure teams had some stuff, but you had no idea. You have no idea that.
You know what I would have paid to see, Connor? The Mets, if a pitching lab existed at the time, the Mets try to convince Turk Wendell that he should use these analytics and this data. I would pay
inside. Turk by keeping to his ways would not step inside the pitching lab or would sage the pitching lab. Hey, we have Turk back on the pod, which is one of our favorite interviews of all time, by the way. We would ask him what he would think of that. It's, oh my goodness. It's also a good question for Ron Darling, just because what I've read, the books I've read on the 80s Mets, he has this, and maybe this is just, pure fiction or whatever it may be, but the reputation Darling had is that he was very, just smart and like very into pitching, right? Like in that era, it was a lot of like, rear back and throw. And I think Darling was one of the guys that actually questioned things. So that I'm sure he's somebody that would have been another one where it's like, man, he would have got all the answers he ever wanted in that situation.
It would have made all sense. Yale grad, so incredibly smart guy. And as you said,
I mean, listen to him talk on any broadcast and it shines through right away. So
yeah, we could do this all day, Connor. We can do this all
day. We really can. Mets history. It's always good to go down the road of Mets history, even when the team has the most wins in baseball. One more question here, and this is about the current team. We'll close out on that. This is from Doc on Twitter. I just have to say, I so look forward to your podcast. Thank you, Doc. While I can honestly say that I feel confident with all 5 of our current starters, what will the plan be when Montas and Manaea return? Yes, a great problem to have. Joe and I give the same answer to these questions every time, and then we expand. These things sort themselves out because, unfortunately, in this sport, especially pitching specifically, guys get hurt, guys get worn out, go through ruts. That's answer number 1. But Joe, let's play the game that this was today. How would you handle if it was today, which it's not?
Yeah, exactly, Connor. I think that's the best way to frame it, because it will work itself out, but that's just not interesting. This is a podcast, Michael, that you look forward to listening to every week, which we very much appreciate. So we're going to actually give an answer. If it were today, the easiest thing is Manaea gets in the rotation and you are in the 6-man rotation that you kind of want to be. So one spot kind of fills that 6-man void that the Mets are, battling off days and working their way through as far as how that's going to work. So when they come back, 1, gets the 6th man, and 2, as good as he's been and as much as he's, I think, taken strides, Tylor Megill to me still just ultimately feels like his long-term home is going to end up in the bullpen one way or another. And as we know, he's a guy that it feels like at times he runs out of gas when he gets into the 5th, or if he gets beyond the 5th into the 6th, it seems like he's running out of gas a little bit. Maybe he's another one of those 2-inning, 3-inning short spurt, let it all loose out of the bullpen. I think I would go Megill, which may sound crazy because he has a 1.7 something ERA, but I think that's the answer, because I think Griffin Canning is more of your traditional back end, take the ball, could go 6-7 innings starting pitcher. And then, I'm not touching the likes of David Peterson or Kodai Senga or Clay Holmes or anyone like that.
No, those guys are entrenched, and they've given you no reason for them not to be. And to be fair to Tylor Megill, neither has he.
Right.
But I think the elephant in the room in this situation is, Joe, Jose Butto is not off to a good start this year. And not off to a dreadful one, but he's had some blow-ups. And that role is incredibly important to this team of going multiple innings, where what if Megill is a ready-made replacement, or even it gives Butto more breathers than he's gotten to be a better version of himself. So I agree with you. It's not an easy decision. And realistically, when this day comes, it will be easier because there will be holes that this team is trying to plug in. I mean, look at the Dodgers right now. Blake Snell is down. Glasnow is down again. Obviously, Kershaw is just always coming back from great teams go through incredible amounts of pitching. And the Mets are going to go through a lot of pitching this year. And when Manaea is back and Montas is back, the Mets might need them desperately. Right now, they don't, which be thankful for that as a Met fan, and thankful that the Griffin Canning experiment and the Tylor Megill tweaks have been an A+ across the board. That's why you do those things. We say it on this podcast a lot, but it's a good way to close today's show. David Stearns has an idea of what he's doing. Remember to subscribe to the show at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review with a question, and we'll look for it for a future mailbag. And of course, you can watch the show, all of the episodes, on SNY's YouTube channel. Become a subscriber over there as well. You'll never miss an episode. Thanks so much, everybody. Catch you next week.